Okay, are we ready?
You're good to go.
So I would call this meeting to order, and the first item of business is the land acknowledgement. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki and the district of Sipekne'katik, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Next, we will have a moment of silent contemplation. Next, we have one piece of correspondence for decision. And the correspondence is in front of you. We do have, after the provincial election, our deputy warden was successful in becoming the new MLA. And we have his letter of resignation in front of us. So we would need to do the formality and have someone move the acceptance of his resignation.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Perry, seconded by Councillor Knockwood. Is there any discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Motion is carried. And I did neglect to say that we have regrets from Councillor Hebb, who is attending a function at the Milford Rec Center and presenting some awards this evening. So that takes us to the main reason for our meeting tonight, which is a discussion on the special election that we have to have due to the resignation of former Deputy Warden McDonald. So over to you, Kim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going to share my screen here. Did everybody see the report on the screen?
Yes.
So, Madam Warden, as you've just received Councillor McDonald's letter of resignation, we do have an issue in hand to set some dates for a special election for District 7. Under the Municipal Elections Act, we have some regulatory requirements that we need to meet as far as council setting those dates at a specific time. So we've called a special meeting tonight so we can get those dates before the 4-week time allotment allowed to call a special election once the seat has been vacated. The report in front of you is quite a lot about the legislation and information that you would have seen, the councilors who were here prior to the last election, things that council must do, like appointing a returning officer for the special election. Typically, that returning officer is the chief administrative officer, and then that chief administrative officer has authority to set and appoint deputy or assistant returning officers if needed. The CAO, as the returning officer, can also set the tariff of fees and expenses for the special election, and they would be in line with prior elections that we've held. As well, council needs to approve the date of the special election. So in this case, the timing set out in this report would indicate that November 6th was an appropriate date for a special election, and that advanced polling period would start on the 28th of October. And depending on whether you go with electronic or paper voting, how that advanced polling period works would be dependent on that. This report recommends that you do a electronic only version of election for the District 7, noting that last time in the regular election, 97% of the votes were cast in District 7 through electronic or telephone means. The information is in the report. Of the 1,025 people that voted, 992 of them cast their ballots electronically. So about 33 people went into the polling station to vote. And those 33 people, we would assume, have access to a telephone and could have voted by phone if they chose, but chose for whatever reason to go into the polling station. Perhaps they were driving by, saw the sign, decided to go vote. We don't know, but certainly not a large volume of people. So this report assumes that council will take the recommendation to have an electronic only election. If that's the case, the budget for that would be about $15,000. 8,000 of that is between legal and advertising notices and whatnot. I would suspect that you're probably only going to spend a few thousand of that eight, but so we don't have to keep coming back. That would be a conservative estimate to run the election. The $7,000 would be a set amount based on the number of voters in the Lance area. In District 7, that would be required to pay the company who does the electronic voting. If you choose to do paper ballot as well as electronic voting, we would come back at your September election with a full budget on running a polling station, hiring staff, getting all of that information together for you for September. We would still set the date this evening, and then we would still do sort of get IntelliVote on the electronic side, assuming you'd want to do both, not just paper polls. And then we would bring back a budget on what that would cost to do the in-person, if that's the route we chose. We're also looking tonight for council to authorize us to use the Nova Scotia Permanent Registry of Voters as a preliminary list of electors. And based on that list, then that would get updated as people call us and update their information. And we would have some engagement around that, making sure that people knew how to vote, where they, and that there was an election and how to get their name on the list. And what we've seen from the last election is that's a very easy process for folks to call in. We would have 2 or 3 internal staff folks taking calls like we did last time. Pam's not with us anymore, but we would certainly be engaging Alana and Shirley and perhaps one other staff person to take those calls and update that database. And then again, authorizing election staff to amend that electors database up until polling day, which would be November 6th. So there is a little bit of background. I think you were all involved in the last election. You all know how successful the electronic voting was, how easy it was. I think it was very well received. And certainly the feedback we got from council after the election was that even folks who weren't 100% in line with online voting certainly saw the benefits after the election for accessibility, for the pandemic, keeping people sort of socially distanced and whatnot, allowing folks to vote who couldn't necessarily vote if they can't leave their homes. Those are all huge factors in maintaining that electronic voting as far as accessibility goes. And then just the ease of voting as well was certainly seen during the last election. And again, just some stats there. The telling vote in the end of the last election was that the cost to do electronic voting for internet and phone was $13 a vote, and the cost to run polling stations was $74 a vote. And I would say that $13 had quite a few things in there for the entire election related to legal fees and whatnot to set that process up. Now we have all those answers. You'd certainly be down to much less than the $13 a vote. We do pay based on the eligible electors in each district, so we would be paying a per elector cost. It's just over $2 on the 2,077 eligible voters in District 7. Based on the legislative requirements, this is the proposed schedule. So that's all included in the motion as it's written. If that needs to change, we can certainly do that based on keeping within that legislative framework in the Elections Act. And the recommendation would be that council authorize staff to conduct a special election in District 7 by electronic method. Madam Warden, the motion is in front of you. The discussion. One thing I should mention is we do have a balance in the election reserve of $90,000, which includes this year's allotment. As council is aware, we set aside money each year to run elections, and then when the election comes, we don't need to increase the tax rate in that particular year for all the costs. So we do have an election reserve of $90,000, which could accommodate this special election.
Okay. Now, before we start the discussion, I neglected to notice we don't have Councillor Eisner with us. Has anyone heard from him? Okay. So if you could slide the motion up so folks could read it, someone please.
Can you see it there?
No, you just have
Kim-
page 2 of your report.
Your screen share doesn't appear to be working properly, Kim. We're stuck on page 2.
Oh. Try that again. All of that scrolling I was doing, nobody saw. Can you see the motion now?
No. Page 1,
Yeah, it's there now.
not on my screen.
Are you looking at Shirley? Do you have the?
I have it on mine.
I'm seeing page 1 of 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the motion, the bottom half.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and sorry, folks, I was busy looking at that screen, so I did not see if anyone has their hand up to vote. So if you would raise your hands, Councillor Rhino.
Well, I guess I'll go old school and show my age. You know, I read this report, and it is surely one-sided toward electronic voting. And I really, I can understand why, you know, electronic voting should be included, but I don't think it should be the only one. You know, you're talking 92% used electronic or telephone last time and 8% didn't. Well, it just seems to spit at me that you're going to say, heck with the other 8%, they can do it this way or not vote at all. That's what I take from it. I think voters
It
should
was
have,
actually 97% and 3%, Councillor.
well, 97 or 3, whatever. The heck with the other 3%, they can do it this way. I really don't like that. I think they should be given a choice to do that. And you know, we look at cost. Yeah, it costs a little bit more, but I really think if we totally walk away from this paper ballot, I think a part of history and regularity in elections is going to be lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor Perry?
Normally I would 100% agree with Councillor Rhino about having the dual option. However, in this case, I am inclined, based on the numbers from the last election and the fact that this is a special election only in one district, I'm comfortable moving forward with an electronic vote only for this special election, and we'll see what numbers that turnout results in vice the general election numbers where we did both, and then we can have further discussions moving forward. But I think for this special election only, I could agree with just doing the online voting and call-in voting based upon the overwhelming majority that that was the only way they voted during the last election. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knockwood?
Yeah, I know I'm somewhat agreeing with Key, but what I want to agree with is it was 2,077 people eligible to vote and only 125 came out or voted. That's like 50%. But I think there should be a way of encouraging people to vote, you know. like you said, license 50%, it's not fair to the other 50%, you know, they decide to go out and vote.
That's
Is-
actually a very high turnout to what we normally have, Counselor, in municipal elections. It's extremely difficult to get people to come out to vote.
Yeah, but you gotta give them the options, right? I just feel like, now, we'd be so used to our elections, but we may even get less because people are sick of our elections here now, you know? But I don't know, I kind of like what Keith was saying, you know, give people the dual options to vote, you know, and it's still part of history of people coming, walking out and giving people drives to the polling stations and all that. I think we should keep that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have next Counselor Musa, followed by Counselor Green.
Thank you, Warden. I totally agree with Keith on this one. And I have another question. If we only end up, like how much time do we have to give notice to the voting company to be able to use them?
Through you, Madam Warden, they would be ready to go. They have everything ready.
So we can wait till after we know if we have election or not, like if we have more than one candidate, or
Oh, yes, yeah.
we still have time after that to.
Yeah, if we only
yeah.
have one, if we have a acclamation, we wouldn't engage them.
So we
do
don't,
the-
yeah. So I was wondering about like the time window, if we have to tell them now or just a few days before the election. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Counselor Green, followed by Counselor Garden Cole.
Well, much the same as Councillor Perry. If this was all through East Hants, I would probably push for paper ballot. But for this district and seeing the numbers as they unfolded, I'm quite comfortable with just electronic, and I would move the recommended motion.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Perry. Now we will go to Counselor Garden Cole, and I'll allow you some leeway. Counselors, you were on prior to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Just wondering about the paper ballots at the poll. Do we have a cost of you know, an expected cost if we were to have a poll? I mean, would it be the same regardless of whether we were just opening up to one district or, you know, to a regular all day poll? Could we have a revised version of that, or?
Through you, Madam Warden, I'm gonna answer that, and then I'm gonna get Shirley to tell me if I'm right or not, because she's the one who's been looking into all of the legislative side of this as our assistant returning officer. So you would have to run, when you do a paper poll, you then have to run the poll based on how the act says it shall be ran. So you have to have a certain number of polling staff, you have to have all your protocols and procedures in place. You have to have a poll officer, it's not what they call them, I can't think of the name right now, at the poll, so someone who's sort of in charge of the poll. So you would have to do all of that. Where you would have that is up for question. So really in Lance, there's the Sportsplex is about the only place. If they weren't available to have room available for an election on that particular day, you could run the poll out of the municipal office in Elmsdale. That's not a long distance for folks to travel, and it's certainly somewhere that they would be used to going. But we couldn't run it with our own internal staff. I would think you would have at least a few folks hired for that day. There's training involved in training election staff. If we could be lucky enough to get some of the folks who worked in our last election, that would be good, but you'd still have some training prior to the election for those folks. So it's not impossible, it just adds a level of complexity to running the election for sure. I don't know, Shirley, if you have anything else to add to that.
I would anticipate we would be looking at 7 workers. There are 3 divisions in the district of Lance. the way the legislation is written is you need to have a poll clerk and a deputy returning officer for each division. That would be 6. And then if we are still in some type of, COVID protocols, we may want a cleaner involved as well to assist with the cleaning of the voting stations. So I think you're probably looking at least 7 outside workers that would have to be hired. There'd also have to be a training process, so there'd be cost to that as well. Not impossible, but it does come at a bit of a cost.
And the polls have to be open for how long, Charlie?
We could get away if you wanted like a bit of a hybrid. If you wanted to do an advanced polling period that's electronic, and then just election day itself have the electronic and a paper poll, we could just do it the one day. We could just have it open the same hours, just the one day, as long as you have an advanced period. If you want actual advanced polls in paper as well, then again, that adds 7 people, 2 more days. So that would be a total of 3 days, and you would have to pick those 2 days as well.
Okay, thank you, Madam Warden.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Based on the information, the discussion, and looking at the numbers, I'm okay with the recommended motion moving forward. That's all.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor. Contrary? And 2 against. So the motion has passed 5 votes to 2 with Councillor Rhino and Councillor Musa voting nay. Is that correct?
No,
On Councillor Knockwood?
Yeah.
Could I see the hands for the nays again, please? Sorry, 3 voting against. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor and 3 against. Councillor Rhino, Councillor Knockwood, and Councillor Musa voting nay. Motion has passed. So that concludes the special election discussion. The only other item we have to make a quick decision on is the selection of a deputy warden, as Councillor McDonald was currently serving as our deputy warden. His term would have been up in October. I really feel that we need to have that deputy warden position filled. I don't want to leave that until October or November, whichever election we would have that, because we may need a deputy warden for something in that interim. And the discussion would be around, do we, at our regular council meeting, elect a deputy warden to serve until the end of the current term and then have another election a month later? Or do we elect a deputy warden at our regular council meeting, and understanding that his term would finish this term and then complete the next term as well? So that's the discussion. Councillor Green.
My feeling would be we would elect one at the next council meeting and he would remain in for the 13 months or whatever the term would work out, to save having another election in the end of October.
Okay. Councillor Rhino.
as long as we have it in September. But I think that input from the councilors that are missing tonight would be very valuable here in the discussion. And I expect it will be discussed further at council meeting, or unless we are making a decision, it will be go this way tonight. I'm just not sure on that. I really don't care as long as it's filled in September at the September meeting, whether that goes 2 months or whether it goes 14. It really, it's not a big issue. So anyway, I'll wait to hear what others say.
Councillor Mitchell.
I'll go to the September council.
Okay.
I can wait till then.
Okay, my problem is I'd like to be able to give staff some kind of direction. I guess it really doesn't matter. We can decide we're going to have a full agenda on council day or on executive day. Councillor Perry.
for the sake of 2 months going through a second vote 2 months later, it really doesn't make sense. I agree with Councilor Rhino wholeheartedly. We should just move forward with the election of a new deputy warden at the September council meeting.
And would the intention be for that person who was elected to remain for the remainder of this term and the next term?
Correct. I think just it's a housekeeping business, but this is the election for the next year or 14 months it will end up being, and we'll keep getting back on the track. That makes sense to me. Thank you.
Councilor Rhino.
Well, like I said, September is good for me, and really no matter which way you go, but I wouldn't want to make a decision here tonight and saying it's going to be 14 or 2 months until we hear from the councillors who are not there. You know, odd thing, councillor may want to try it for 2 months and doesn't like it, and others say, yeah, let's go for 14. So really, let's make a decision in September, and let's make a decision in September if it's going to be 2 months or 14. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's not time consuming to have an election such as that. So,
Councilor Perry.
Yeah, and just as kind of a question, we can make that decision and then hold the vote the same night for to fill that position, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, does that complicate anything?
No, really, Madam Warden, what we need to know from a staff perspective is, do you want time on your September agenda to elect a new deputy warden? And then if you do, then we'll put some time on the agenda, and having heard this conversation, if you want to have the 2 or 14-month conversation, then we'll add a few more minutes for that discussion to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
And did I see anyone else's hand up? Councilor Knockwood.
I agree with Councilor Perry there. I think if we be voting in September, I think he or she would be willing to do it for 14 months, I think myself, so. They wouldn't run if they didn't want it, so I'm fine with what Councilor Perry's saying.
So I guess what I'm looking for then, Councilor Musa?
Couldn't we decide on a council policy today, like when we have everybody on?
That is the discussion, that we could do that. We are perfectly able to make the decision tonight. I understand that there are 2 councilors who are not here, but this was a meeting that was on the calendar, has been on the calendar, and lots of notice was given. And we can't, we all have reasons occasionally that we may miss a meeting, but the business of council is not held up because I miss a meeting or anyone misses a meeting. I'm just making that comment. So, Councilor Green.
I would move that at September regular council, the position of deputy warden be filled for a 14-month position.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Mitchell. Discussion on the motion.
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary? Motion has passed with Councilor Rhino voting nay. So that concludes the business of our special meeting of council, folks.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Musa, seconded by Councilor Green. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Motion is carried. We are adjourned. We'll give Shirley some time to